Hi everyone, again. My name is Nimrod Geva and I manage the KWIZ product group. And today I'm going to speak about one of our products, which is called DataView plus Webpart, which is an SPFX tool for SharePoint Online and Teams. For those of you who are not familiar with KWIZ, just a brief overview. We've been developing add-ons and apps for SharePoint, SharePoint Online, and Teams since 2005, and we are operating from Toronto. As I said, today I'm going to talk about a set of tools, which is our SPFX package for SharePoint, SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2019, and Teams. And actually, I'm going to speak about two Webparts. The first Webpart is called DataView Plus, which saying that it's one Webpart, it's a bit misleading because actually it includes many Webparts. And the purpose of this Webpart is to be a kind of a Swiss knife, an all-in-one solution for retrieving data from many kinds of data sources and display the data using many kinds of display controls. So it's like an all-in-one solution for the most common data retrieval and display requirements. And the second Webpart that I'm going to talk about, which is also part of the same package, the DataView toolset package, is the DataView shared filter. And this Webpart actually has two purposes. The first one is to enable the ability to filter multiple DataView Webparts on a page. This is a very common requirement. We have this in SharePoint on-prem. The add-on that many of our customers use there is the list filter plus Webpart, which connects to many list view Webparts and other Webparts using Webpart connections and enable filtering using custom filters to filter many Webparts on the page. So this is the solution we have here also for SharePoint Online. And the second purpose of this Webpart, it is used to enable Webpart connection between DataView plus Webpart. And I'll show you an example. Okay, so what can you do with the DataView plus Webpart? Because the focus today is on shared filters and Webpart connections, I'll just show you some examples. I won't drill down to every feature of DataView Plus, but I'll show you some examples so you know what it's good for. So here you see, for example, the DataView Plus Webpart rendered as a table, as a grid control, connecting to Graph API. And this is why you can see users from Azure Active Directory and also documents from my OneDrive, because these two resources can be accessed by using Graph API, okay? Another example of the same Webpart, this time it's rendered as a calendar, and I can use it to aggregate many SharePoint calendars, not just 10 like in SharePoint, but a lot more. And I can also do not just manual aggregation, like adding 5 or 6 calendars to aggregate, but I can do dynamic aggregation using a query. So I can aggregate calendars across my entire tenant. And on the right side, you see the same DataView Plus rendered as a calendar, but this time it shows an agenda view connected to Exchange Online. So it shows a shared Exchange calendar and also Microsoft 365 group calendar. Both are accessible through Graph API again. Another example of DataView Plus is for org charts. And here I can connect to a list, an Excel file, or to Azure Active Directory, or to SharePoint Profile Service. Okay, and you can also see some other controls. For example, I configured it to group these. Actually, I have here multiple org charts per department, and they can be accessed by using tabs. And I also configured custom filters to enable users to easily find an employee if you have a big org chart, not just like this one, which is not so typical. Another example of the same Webpart, more like a phone book, where I can have a tabular view, like a grid view. Again, tabs where I can group by department, and more extensive filter. Again, I configured this filter, but you can also see here custom actions. So next to each employee, you see these icons, which are custom item actions, fully customizable using DataView Plus. So you can call the user, send an email, and so on. This is fully customizable. Showing you some more examples, again, about org charts. It's not just about org charts. We also have a feature called display groups. And display groups enable you to display multiple web parts in one web part. They can be accessed by using these tabs. And you can also use audience targeting to display only the web parts that you want to display to specific users or groups. Another feature which is more specific to the org chart display is the ability to have employee placeholders. Many times you have vacant jobs that are not occupied, but you need to show them in your org chart. So you can do an overlay of your real organization chart, taking from Azure Active Directory, for example, with employee placeholders data source, which can be taken, for example, from a list or from Excel file. So you get one unified org chart that includes all real and logic entities. We have many picture galleries. Again, these are just additional control of the same DataView plus Webpart, so you can take them from many data sources. The topic that I'm going to concentrate or to focus in this session is more about this, about shared filter, the ability to have a custom filter that can filter multiple web parts on the page. This one I will show in details. One more thing that I wanted to mention, the DataView tools package is based on ASPFX and Microsoft Fluent UI, which means it really looks amazing, and it's really convenient, not just in your desktop, but also in handheld devices, okay? And that's how it was designed from the beginning. Another control that we have in the DataView Plus is the custom control. And I'll show an example of this risk matrix. Many times customers need something else which is more customized than the controls that I showed you so far, like calendar, org chart, grid, and so on. Sometimes they need something very customized, for example, a floor plan of a factory. So with the custom control, you can have a custom HTML, custom design HTML and CSS integrated with the data source. So you can have a dynamic map or dynamic whatever you need customized to your needs. What I'm going to do now, just to give you the feeling, how is it to work with the DataView Webpart, I'm just going to show you a very simple example, but I'll start from scratch. So you'll see the exact experience of adding the Webpart to the page and what you can do with it. And then I'll continue to our subject, which is shared filters and Webpart connections. So I have here an empty page, okay? And I want to add, just a second. I'm just going to move this to my second screen. Okay, so let's edit this page. And once you install the DataView tools package, you will see all the QuizCom web parts in your Webpart gallery. So all these web parts are included in the DataView plus Webpart. I can use one of them, but I can use Data View Plus. It's the same thing. So once you add the Data View Plus Webpart to the page, it's empty. And the first thing you need to do is connect it to a data source. Okay, so I'm clicking here, configure data source. And the Data View Plus can connect to one or more data sources that can be displayed in an overlay, for example, like in a calendar. So I'm going to add a data source, and I'm going to call it event budget requests, just a name. And here you select the data source types. And here you can see all the types that I mentioned. So you can connect this Webpart to an Excel file or to Graph API if you want to connect to Azure Active Directory, Exchange Online, OneDrive, and so on. You can connect it to SharePoint user profiles, to a simple SharePoint list, to SharePoint list aggregator and SharePoint search. The last two enable aggregation, dynamic aggregation from SharePoint. It can be, if you use the SharePoint search API data source, you can aggregate across your entire tenant. Okay, so these are the data sources. I'm going to pick the most simple one, which is the SharePoint list. And now I see the properties that I need to update. So I need to configure to which SharePoint list and in which site. It doesn't have to be on the same site. So I'm going to connect to another site collection. So I'm going to put here the URL. And now I'm going to select the list. So it's called event budget requests. Okay. And I can also filter by list view and so on. But for now it's enough. And I can add additional data sources. But I'll stay with this one. So now you see the data. Let me make the screen a bit bigger. Okay. Now you see the data, and this is the default display. It's a list control data, and you see that we have all these controls. So if you see here, we have a menu control with some default menus that can be changed, folders control, paging control, list control. Let's start playing with this Webpart and change the look and feel just by messing with the controls. So to decide which controls I want to display on the screen once I connected to a data source, I click here on the gear icon on the top one. And you see all these controls. So I'm going to switch off the menu control and switch off the folders control. Let's stay with the paging control. And for the content, I'm going to switch from list, which is, by the way, very good for handheld devices because it's not a table control. So it's a lot more flexible. I'm going to switch to a table control, which is what we're used to have in SharePoint most of the time. So now I have a table control, and these columns are taken from the view that I'm connecting to. And you see that I have some default item actions here, okay? And first thing I want to do, and these are budget request control items, okay, for events. And what I'm going to do now, the first thing, I want to group them by city. Okay, so I need a tabs or a groups control. So I'm going here again to the gear icon. I'm going to switch on the groups or tabs. And I'm going to stay with tabs. So now it's grouped by some field. And I want to group it by city. So I'm going to drag the city column here to the tabs control and drop it. So now I see the events grouped by the city where they take place, okay? And if I want to change the tabs to accordion sections, I'm just going to change it. And now it looks like this, okay? These are accordion sections. And of course, I can change the column by which I want to group. And every such control, of course, can be configured. So if I go to the tabs control and click its gear icon, I can see group by. If I switch to advanced mode, you'll see some more features. We don't show them by default because it might overwhelm non-technical users. Okay. Next thing I would like to do is maybe enable users to find things, find items in this Webpart. So for now, I'll get rid of the tabs, and instead I'm going to insert the search. I can have both, but just for the sake of this example. So now I have a filter control, and by default, it displays just a search control that searches all columns. So if I click here, I don't know, Tor, so also let's update this. So we say, okay, so yeah. So for example, I typed rich and it found Richmond Hill. Okay, but it's not just a search box. Actually, I can add any filter that I want. So by clicking here on the, I'm back in edit mode, and by clicking here on the plus icon, I can add now any filter that I want. So let's add budget and maybe also the event date. Okay, and you know what? I want to get rid of the text filter. Okay, so I have here budget, event date, and maybe city. Let's add city as a filter. Okay, so let's save this. So now I have a custom filter. The nice thing here that each filter behaves according to its type. So you can see that the date filter has its date picker, so it enables me to configure a date span to find event according to date. But it also enables me to pick one of the dates that already appear in the list, or multiple if I want. Okay. I can do the same with city. So city has a picker, of course. Show me only events taking place in Barrie, or show me only events that take place in all places but Barrie. We have all these kind of things. But it's also a textual filter. All the filters also behave as textual filters. So if I type Toronto, or the beginning of the word Toronto, of course it will filter by. So this is how you can add your own custom filters. Okay. Another thing that you can do, and I think this is the last example, just to show you the feeling, how is it to work with this Webpart. Many times you need to highlight information. So if I add the conditional formatting control, I can add rows. For example, if I want to highlight the more expensive events, so let's have them in white over red background. Okay, and let's call it high budget events, and I want to highlight the entire row or a specific column. So only the budget column I want to highlight. And now I want to add a condition. So the condition would be, I want to highlight the events where the budget is greater than I don't know, $15,000. So you see only the events that are more expensive than $15,000 are highlighted. And so, and by the way, you do the same with org charts and calendars. It's never mind which controls you have here to display your content. The filter, the conditional formatting, the tabs, everything works the same. That's more or less just to give you the look and feel and how is it. Oh, one last thing, you saw here the custom actions that we have. Yeah. By default, we show these custom actions. If you click here, you see the event properties, and you can send the event by email and so on. But what if I want to show, for example, the city on a map? So I can go here to the table control settings, and let's switch to advanced mode to show all the settings. And here you see the item actions. And I can change these item actions. For example, let's change action number 4. And instead of this, you see this opens the script editor, which is JavaScript or Knockout. And I can use snippets. So instead, I'm going to add the snippet show city in map. And all you have to update in this snippet to use it, you see here item.city. If your column that holds the city name is named differently, just change this. And this is how all our snippets work. You just need to change one line where the column names are located. And sorry, I also wanted to change the icon. So let's have a different icon of a map. Let's see if we have something like this. Yes, let's use this one. And I think we're good. Let's see how it works. So I'm saving this as a draft. And you see now I have a different action here. So if we'll open new market here, okay, so this is where new market is. And of course you can view an enlarged map. Because it's a script, you can, for example, code it to open in a bigger window and so on. But this is just an example that shows you that you can really enhance and create your own menus. This applies to item action and also to the menu bar. You can also have custom menu bars, okay? So this is how you work with the Data View Plus. You select a data source, one or more, and then you add the controls that you want to use and you configure them. That's about it. So let's move on to the, you see some other examples of what you can do with the same Webpart here. So I was mentioning the calendar, right? I want to show you just how these calendars are configured. So you'll see it's the same Webpart and the same effort, by the way. So let's just go to another browser window that I have here. Okay, so the first calendar example are aggregation from multiple data sources, and I group the events by meeting groups, okay, which is quite a classic requirement. And also I added some filtering here, okay. So to do that, I just, let me show you the data source settings. So I have here a calendar control instead of the table control that you saw before. And as for the data source, I have here 3 data sources. Each one of them is of type list. So actually I have here manual aggregation of 3 lists. Each one has a different color coding. So this is why you see them in different colors. Okay, very simple. And the calendar is a calendar control. It has many, many settings, like what kind of views, monthly, weekly, daily. You can have others, agenda views, and so on. There's tons of properties for this calendar control. Another example is a more dynamic one. This is dynamic aggregation. Unlike the manual one that I showed you, where you manually add each calendar that you want to show, it's not practical in dynamic scenarios. For example, project management portal, where you want to aggregate milestones or tasks from all your project sites. And these project sites are added all the time. So you don't want to find yourself having to update the data source every time a new project site is added. That's why you need dynamic aggregation. So here I have a single data source. It's called project milestones, but it's not of type list. It's of type list aggregator. And what it does, it runs a query on a single, here I configured one aggregation scope. And this aggregation scope says search in specific site and all its subsites. And it goes to some other site collection where my projects are, okay? And I can also limit the aggregation by list title pattern. For example, here I'm aggregating only from lists that their name ends with milestones. And I can also limit by the site name, okay? I can also limit by list types and content types and so on. So I can create in this way multiple aggregation scopes and run a query that retrieves from hundreds or thousands of sites, okay, in one data source. That's the nice thing, okay? And this is what, and of course you can see in the agenda what I have configured here in the conditional formatting rules. I highlighted high value cost projects and so on. Another example is where I show calendars from my personal Outlook, or from Exchange shared calendar, or from Microsoft 365 group. All of these calendars are using a different type of data source. This is the Graph API data source that I mentioned. I just want to show you really quickly how it looks like. So if I go here, for example, to my main calendar, this one shows my Outlook, my personal Outlook calendar. So you see there's one data source. The type is Graph API. And here you see the Graph API properties. It is quite ugly. I don't mess with it. What I do when I need to connect to any Graph API resource, I just click Load Graph Examples. And because I'm showing now a calendar control, we show you here only the calendar relevant examples. If you switch to org chart control, we show you other examples here. But all you have to do is just click the example. This will auto-populate all the Graph API properties. And of course, if you want to change it because you know Graph API and you want to change the query or bring more columns and so on, of course you can do it. That's why we exposed all the Graph API properties here in the Webpart. Okay, so that's about some examples of how you can use the Data View Plus. What I wanted to show you now, I'll skip the custom control. Let's see. Yeah. The next thing I wanted to show you are the shared filters. And this is a new feature that we added only a month ago. And this is due the big request from customers who used to have Webpart connections and the ability to filter multiple Webparts on the page in their dashboards and so on. So we added this ability also to our Data View Tools package. And this is done by using the shared filter Webpart. Let me just show you how it works. So I have here in this example two Webparts, okay? Two Data View Plus Webparts. One aggregates tasks, okay? And it displays these tasks in a table view. And I also added here some tabs, grouping by priority. And I have another Webpart, another Data View Plus Webpart rendered as a calendar, which aggregates events. And every event has a location, has an owner. An event can be billable because it's a milestone, for example, or not. And similar in tasks, every task is assigned to someone and also can be a billable task or not. And now I want to add a filter that will apply to both Webparts. I can add a filter to each of these Webparts separately. I already showed it to you. It's one of the controls in Data View Plus. But here the requirement is different. I have 2, 3, or 4 Webparts on the page, and I want one filter that will apply to all of them. So let's edit the page. Okay, and I'm going to add the share filter part. Okay. You should filter Webpart. And this is the display you get when you put it on the page in the first time, okay? I'm not going to do anything. Let's just close this tooltip. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just saving this as a draft. Let's see what's the end result of just adding the Webpart to the page. Okay. So what I get is a single search box that is automatically connected to all the other Webparts. I don't need to configure anything, but it's not filtering any specific column. It just filters, it searches all the column in all the data view Webparts on the page. So for example, there are tasks here assigned to Shai Patel. And I see here also events where the owner is Shai Patel. So if I click here, Shai, that should be enough. Okay, so I see now only events assigned to Shai Patel, only events where the owner is Shai Patel. So it's different columns, different data sources, but it doesn't matter. We search all columns. So this is the most basic search. It searches everything. Okay, all data sources, all columns. But let's do something else. I don't want just a search. I want to filter. Okay, so I want to have a filter. I want to filter by employee. So I want to have here an employee filter that will filter the milestones, the milestones list here by the assigned to column, and will filter the team calendar by the owner column. Both I want to be mapped to the same employee filter here on the top. So this is what we need to do. Let's edit the page again. And the first thing I need to do before I add the filter, I need to create a custom column. This custom column, once I create it, I will connect the filter to it in the shared filter Webpart. And in the other hand, I will go to each of these Webparts and map this custom column to the target column in each of their data sources. So first thing I need to do is create a column mapping. So I'm going to create a custom column. These are columns that already exist in the data view plus data sources if I want to connect to them. But in this case, I want to create a new custom column, and I'm going to call it employee. Okay. That's it. Second thing, after I created this custom column, I'm going to create a filter and connect it to this custom column. Now, I can add the filter in the same section. We have a section with one filter here, the search box, or I can create additional section. That's in case I want them to, the filter to display as with different sections. Okay, for example, this is section, I call it text search, and I'm going to create another section here, call it advanced filter. It's not a must. I can stay with one section. I don't need to have titles here. It's just showing you the possibilities. Now, each section has some settings, like where do I want to show the filter captions as placeholders inside the field, like you see here, or above or beside the field. Filter settings, what do I want to do if I have multiple filters in a section? Do I want to do an AND operation between them, or do I want to hide a section? Sometimes you want to filter, but without enabling the users to change the filter. So you can set up a filter, save the filter using this save button here, and hide it from the end users. But we won't do it now. So I created another section, and I'm going to create now the employee filter. So I want the employee filter to search under custom columns in the employee field that custom column that I created. I want the caption of this filter to be called employee. And I want this filter to be rendered as a user, as a person field. And the operator, I wanted to check for equal values. I can do other things, but I'll leave it like this. And here is my employee filter. Let's save this. And let's look here for Shai. So let's refresh first, sorry. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do one thing. Okay, I created custom column, correct? I created filter, which is connected to this custom column that I did, but I didn't do the last thing that I mentioned need to be done. I need to now to map this custom column also to the data sources of the Webparts. So I'm going to the milestones Webparts and I'm clicking the data source icon and I'm going to column mapping. And here you see we have custom column mapping. And I want to map the custom employee column. Here it's called assigned to. So I want to map it to the assigned to column here in the data source of this Webpart. And same thing I need to do here in my calendar Webpart. I'm going to the data source, to the column mapping setting. And under custom column mapping, I'm mapping the employee custom column to the owner. Here it's called owner. That's it. Now, these two Webparts are connected to the same custom column to which the employee filter is connected. And now I'm going to save it. And let's filter now. So let's click here, shy. And you see only events where the owner is shy and only milestones where it's assigned to shy, okay? And so I want to add another filter here, billable filter. So I want to the ability to filter only milestones where is payment is yes. So these are billable milestones. And same for events, only events where there's a payment, okay? So I want to add a checkbox to the shared filter here. First thing, as before, I need to create a custom column, okay? And then create the control and connect it to it. So here in custom column, I'm going to create a new custom column. And I'm going to call it billable. And now I'm going to add another filter here in the second section next to the employee. So I wanted to search in the billable under custom columns in the billable custom column, and the name, the caption of this filter will be billable, and I want it to be rendered as a yes no checkbox. And now I need to connect it also to the consumer Webparts. So here I'm gonna map it to is payment column. Here it is. Done. And in the calendar Webpart, I want to map it. I don't remember the name of the column. Let me see. It's also payment or billable. Payment. No, not payment. Billable milestone. Okay. And you know what? Sometimes when you have multiple filters, you don't want to refresh the page on every selection. You would like to have an apply cancel button, right? So let's edit, and I'm clicking save. Okay, so I have two sections here with titles and everything. So let's have a look. I'm checking the billable and clicking apply. So you see only is payment yes appears here, and only events in the calendar where you have a payment appear. And if I uncheck it, I want to show only non-billable events. So you see only milestones with no is payment, and same for calendar. And I can clear the filter to show everything from the beginning. Okay, so this is a quick way to filter multiple web parts on the page. Now, so we have a mechanism, as you see, that allows me to create custom columns and then map these custom columns to target columns in the Webpart data sources, right? So this is very useful for our next feature, which is, yeah, we talked about shared filters, which is Webpart connections. And here I'm looking for a different scenario. It's a very common master details scenarios or one-to-many scenarios where you have one web part that it's not a filter web part. It's a web part that displays content. And when you select a specific item, you want it to filter other web parts. It's a classic web part connection scenario in SharePoint on-prem, okay? So here we're actually using the same mechanism, and I'll explain how we do it. Let's move to our next example here. And as you see, let's refresh this first. So here I have 3 web parts in the page, okay? The first data view plus web part is employees. The second one currently shows empty. And the third one also shows empty, shows evaluations and tests. And once I select an employee, I will see here the employee card with the exact properties that I want to display in the employee image. And here I will see the selected employees evaluations and tasks. And of course, I did some configurations like I already explained. For example, here in the top web part, I grouped the employees by their employment format, like if it's commissions, contract, or salary. I configured some custom filters, and I also configured custom menu bar with menus. All these are snippets, and you can also see here custom item actions like call employee and so on. Let me just see. Yeah. Now, how does it work? So each of these web parts is connected to its data source. Actually, the first one, employees, and the second one, which shows one employee, are connected to the same data source, which is a list. And here the evaluations and tasks, here I'm using display groups to show 2 web parts in one web part, actually, because each of these tabs connects to a different data source, showing a different layout. So here I'm displaying I'm using the display groups feature. This is connecting to 2 different data sources. Evaluations is a list and a task is a list. So how do we do this filter? If I switch to edit mode, you'll see what's going on behind the scenes. And actually, it's very cool once you understand how the shared filter works. So as I explained, the shared filter enables me to create custom columns, which I can map the target filtered columns in every data source to them. So I have here the shared filter. You don't see it because it's hidden. I configured it to be hidden in the page, but I'm using it not as a filter. I'm only using its custom columns. So I created here, go here to custom, one custom column called employee ID. That's it. That's the only thing I'm doing with this shared field. Now, I'm going to this top web part, and this web part is now, it is not filtered. It is the web part which filters other web parts. And here I'm using this filter icon. And I configured this web part to be a filter provider. Okay. And what I'm doing here, every time you select an item, I'm sending the item's ID value into this custom column in the shared filter, the employee ID. And the other 2 web parts I just connect to the shared filter like I did in the previous example. These two webparts are not aware that the actual webpart which filters them is the one above. They think it's the shared filter. Okay, so if I go here, you'll see that this webpart is filtered by the employee ID custom column, like in the previous example. And also this one is also filtered by the employee ID. That's it. Okay. Here, by the way, I have two different data sources, task and evaluation. So in the tasks, the employee ID, the custom column, is connected to the assigned to column. So I'm using the shared filter here above as a bridge that enables me to send the selected items ID to the other two webparts below. And this way you can connect, you can do much more complex structures. Like I can have this webpart filtered not just by one master, it can be filtered by multiple. All you have to do is just configure another webpart as a filter provider, as I did here. Okay, filter provider, and map selected item column to a custom column in the shared filter. That's it. This enables you to connect any data view webpart to any other one or more data view webpart. So in this example, it took me about 20 minutes, I think. Most of the time is just to create the list, to create this by the way, if I also allow to select multiple items, so you'll see multiple user cards. And by the way, this user card, I didn't give it much attention, but it's another type of control. Okay, so if I go here, you want to see how I did it. You see, this is a card. Let me just go to edit mode. Yeah, if you look here, it's a card control. Yeah, and you can see it has all these properties like we have all kind of layouts. I chose item card with image, but it has other layouts, okay? And once you select, you can configure exactly what to have in each line. So you can use static information, but you can use tokens. Like I did here, I just inserted the columns that I want to show in the employee card, and I can also format them as I want, insert snippets and so on. So it's completely dynamic. Okay, so that was a quick demonstration of how you can do webpart connections and shared filters to implement more complex use cases. Finally, I wanted also to remind you that I mentioned it in the beginning, but the Data View Tools package also works inside Teams. And this is a very common scenario. You have your collaborative environment inside Teams in some channel, and you need your Teams calendar, you need the org chart, you need to bring data from Microsoft 365, Planner or whatever, or from your SharePoint site. It's all the same effort, which is nothing. You just add the webpart to the page, connect it to a data source, one or more, by the way, if you need to overlay multiple data sources, and just insert it to as a tab to Team. And the way it's done, once you deploy the QuizCon Data View Tools package in your tenant catalog, you need to sync it to Teams. Okay. Once you do it, that's it. You go to your Teams, you click the plus to add a new tab. You'll see the Data View Plus like all other apps that you can add. Once you select it, you click Add, and that's it. You're done. You have it now, and you can select how you want to render it. It includes all the webparts, as I mentioned, and that's it. It's here, and you can do whatever you want with it inside Teams. If you want to check out Data View Plus, you can do it in two ways. You can download the package and install it in your tenant. There's a wizard. You just go to the app page and click download and try. If you don't have tenant global admin permissions and so on, but you still want to check out the product, you can contact us at sales@quizcon.com and ask for a private sandbox. And we'll create a sandbox for you on our tenant so you can play with the product and check it out and see if it works. One limitation, when you check the product on our tenant, you won't be able to use your Graph API to connect to your Graph API resources. So you can't, this is because of security limitations. So if you want to check the Webpart connected to Azure Active Directory to Exchange Online, you'll have to do it on your tenant, not on ours.